Hey guys, welcome to Alienation. My name is Megan and every Sunday I sit down and talk about some form of weird and not so wonderful topic that really interests me. So last week we looked into an unsolved true crime case and well, I'm kind of sticking to that theme as well this week. But this week I'm going to be talking about some unsolved turned solved missing person cases, which is so interesting to me. These sort of cases absolutely blow my mind. I had actually planned on only covering one specific case today, but after seeing how bizarrely common this sort of thing is, or like how many times it's actually happened, I had to talk about at least another one. So I'm going to be covering two cases today. There are some slightly uncomfortable topics in today's episode, so here is my little disclaimer as usual. Warning, today's episode contains contents and descriptions that some audience members may find disturbing, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. So who are we going to be talking about today? Well, the two guys we're going to be mentioning are William Earl Malt and Davey Lee Niles. Sadly, both of these people went missing for a very long time. Their families had no answers, there was just no leads, no nothing. They were there one day and gone the next. Until years later when they finally got some answers and hopefully they got some form of closure, but it baffles me. It really does baffle me how people can just vanish off the face of the earth and never be seen again. I completely understand how it's very possible, but it's a very scary thought. We're actually going to start with William's case, so William Earl Malt's case, as this was the one that I was kind of planning on doing before I stumbled on all the other cases. It's actually more of a well-known case. It wouldn't surprise me if any of you have heard of this before. So his case all started back in 1997, specifically November 8th of that year, which was sadly the day he was reported missing. So who was William Earl Molt? Sadly, there isn't much information on either of the gentlemen, so again, I'm sorry if this one is quite vague. But at the time of his disappearance, William was around 40 years old, and he had a girlfriend at the time. Again, there's no information on the girlfriend, but we know he was in a relationship, and as far as I'm aware, it was his girlfriend who did actually report him missing. So Will was known or referred to or nicknamed Bill, so I'll either refer to him as William or Bill in this case. So William was a mortgage broker, and he apparently was a very quiet man. He didn't really socialise much. I mean, same. And he wasn't a regular drinker. He didn't really hit the nightclubs often. However, on the 9th of the 7th of November of 1997, he chose to head to a nightclub or a bar in Lantana. Is it Lantana? I think that's how you pronounce it. Lantana, Florida. And that is where William lived. He lived in that area of Florida. So while Bill was there, he kept to himself. He didn't socialise with anyone. He sort of sat at the bar, had his own drinks, because like I mentioned, he wasn't a really sociable guy. This is something he didn't usually do regularly. But he did choose to have several drinks while he was there, and he did kind of stand out to the staff because he wasn't a regular drinker there. You know, they always know the usuals that are in there, the regulars, and Bill wasn't one of them. And also why he was there, why he chose to specifically go and have some drinks, I presume after work, we don't really know. But either way, he had chosen to have a few drinks there, and according to the staff, he didn't appear to be intoxicated or drunk or anything, but at around 9:30 p.m. of that evening, he phoned his girlfriend to say that he would be coming home soon. But sadly, this was the last time his girlfriend would ever hear from him. So a couple hours did pass and it was around 11 p.m. now, and Bill did leave the nightclub. So he headed off by himself. He didn't meet up with anyone there, but he left by himself and he went and got in his own car. This does baffle me a little bit because even though the report said he didn't appear to be drunk and that he was apparently sober of some sort, he had had several drinks while he was in the nightclub. I'm not speculating or assuming anything in the slightest, but yeah, don't drink and drive, guys. Just don't do it. So his car was actually a 1994 white Saturn SL, which is actually a sedan. And well, he headed home. But unfortunately, Bill did not make it home that night, or the next night, or the next night. And over 2 decades would pass before anyone got any form of answer as to what happened that night. So jumping ahead, 22 years later, and it is now August 2019, and we all know of a little thing called Google Earth or Google Maps. I use it regularly. I presume a lot of people do. Google Earth or Google Maps comes in quite handy when it comes to this case, and I will get into that in a little bit. But another thing that is kind of key to this case is a guy called Jerry Nyman, and he worked for the school district of Palm Beach County, specifically in the transportation department. He was a programmer, and his job regularly involved using Google Maps or Google Google Earth to check bus routes. However, at this time, Jerry was contacted by a high school principal or head teacher, if you're from the UK, from Polo Park Middle School, and he basically asked him if he was able to check the routes that some of the students would be walking to school, just to make sure that they were safe, they weren't walking near any highways or anything really dangerous, stuff like that. And obviously Jerry said yeah, that was completely fine, he could do something like that. But that specific school's name really rang a bell for Jerry, and it was actually because his ex-girlfriend's 2 daughters attended that school. So his ex-girlfriend, her name was Erica, and they were both still on pretty good terms. Even though they weren't together anymore, they still kept in contact, they were still in touch, there was no bad blood or anything like that. So Jerry does his thing, he pops onto Google Maps just to check exactly where the school was in that area, and yep, just like he thought, it was actually really close to Erica's house. I just want to point out something. I saw quite a few comments on this behaviour that Jerry was doing, apparently being shifty and saying it was really weird of him, that he was stalking his ex-girlfriend and all that lot. No, calm down with your cancel culture. This behaviour could be questionable, but they were on good terms. And let's think about this. If that was my job and it involved someone who once was in my life and the two crossed over, for example, like, oh, hey, that's where Erica lives. I've been asked to look into the school where her kids go and check the routes are safe. I was in her kid's life at some point, probably cared about them, and probably still do. And if I'm checking if those routes are safe, why wouldn't I check to see if that route was safe? And another point, you're human. We're all nosy. I don't know if he lived there, but he probably spent a lot of time there. Like, oh, I used to go there all the time. Like, there is no harm in doing that in the slightest. So yeah, so many people were like, oh, he's creepy, he's got a bad vibe. No, he probably was just doing that. But anyway, that's exactly what he did. And this is where he noticed something really unusual on Google Maps. So Erica lived in a residential community area or a housing development. It was called the Grand Isles, and this was in Wellington in Florida. And it had a bunch of these sort of man-made lakes all around it, so sort of plopped in between all the houses. And they were pretty big lakes. So what had Jerry seen that made him zoom right in on Google Maps? You can go actually quite close when you're looking at the satellite. So it's not when you're just looking at a map version of it, it's when you're looking at the sort of 3D version where you can see everything as if you were looking at it from a bird's eye view. But in one of those man-made lakes, specifically one in the 3700, I don't know how you guys pronounce those numbers, but 3700 block of Moon Bay Circle, appeared to be a strange yellow looking object, weirdly shaped like a car. So I think we kind of know where this is going by now. You're putting 2 and 2 together. But anyway, Jerry then decided to look at all the other cars that were in the area on Google Maps. Because obviously not all of these photos were taken recently. Cars at the time could look different or be different. Like we all know, cars change in appearance all the time. And obviously it was still on Google Maps. So he wanted to see what other cars looked like to see if he could match the thing in the lake and say, yeah, that's definitely a car. And in the meantime, he did decide to text Erica to basically just ask if she could be of any form of assistance. So at first, Erica thought it was a little bit of a joke. He was asking if she had cars in her backyard, if she was like hiding cars or something. But he basically said that he thought there was a car in one of the lakes behind her house. So even though it was a man-made lake, it was still a lake. Lakes are really muggy, they're really dirty, they're brown, and they're mostly not clear water. They're very unclear. So if you were to look at the specific photos, you can see the clearness of someone's swimming pool and then the murkiness of the lake. Yeah, they're not the clearest of water to be looking through. But Erica did decide to go out and see if she could see anything, so she did take a look at that specific lake in the specific area that Jerry had said he thought he could see something, but she couldn't see a car and she really couldn't see anything at all. If you do get a moment or you are watching, go and have a look at the photos or take a look at this video. There appears to be like a mossy bank where it's probably full of like weeds and crap or whatever, and then this object, I say in air quotations, appears to be a little bit further out past that, so it is slightly away from like the edge of the lake. But either way, Erica couldn't see anything at all, so she decided to go and speak to one of her neighbours, and his name was Barry Fay. Asked if he could see anything, and then I'm a little bit unsure as to who it was, but either Barry or another neighbour ended up using a drone to check to see if this specific object was there. It turns out they confirmed there was a car in the lake. I'm unsure as to what exactly happened next, but eventually the police were called. And within 2 days of that phone call, the car was actually pulled from the lake. Obviously, with Erica living there, it was pretty much on her doorstep. She was even able to get a video of them pulling the car out of the lake, and also potentially discovering what lay in the car as well.
I got the text message from Erica, and she had even added a little video where she showed they had actually pulled the car out of the canal.
The bags are open, yes. Yes, it's gotta be.
So yeah, obviously if you are not watching or you didn't catch that, a body was discovered inside the car, which instantly makes this some form of crime scene to an extent. So the police wanted to speak to Erica and Jerry and basically find out, like, how on earth did you know there was a car with a body in the lake? Because it was an active investigation now. They had to figure out what happened and how this poor person ended up in that lake. So after speaking with Jerry and Erica and probably other people as well that were involved, the police realised that it was just a bizarre coincidence, kind of turned into amateur investigations and then discovering the fact that there was a car there. And apart from that, the two had no involvement in the case whatsoever. So both of them had actually also been looking into a cold case missing persons website, and I don't know if the two of them discovered this or the police discovered this, but regardless, it turns out that vehicle was a match for a car that vanished along with its owner 22 years ago. And funnily enough, it was the 1994 white Saturn SL sedan. And you guessed it, the remains found inside the car were also a match to William Earl Malt. And the crazy thing about this, those specific images of the area and of that lake that were on the Google Earth satellite have been visible and accessible to the public since 2007, which is insane. So for 10 years, he was in that car before it was even visible to the public. And then it took an extra 12 years on top of that for someone to randomly stumble upon it and notice that he was there. Again, while doing my research, I did notice that a lot of people have said, like, how has no one noticed that? How has it gone unseen for so long? But like I mentioned, there's like a bank which is probably just built up with crap and weeds, plants and everything. And to be able to see the car, you'd have to be able to see past all that, sort of over it. And the car was sort of dropped down a little bit as if it was sort of hanging down, like it's not near the surface, if that makes sense. So unless you are specifically flying a drone over there or searching on Google Maps, you're not going to see it. Like, you can't walk up to the lake in the broad daylight and see the car. So just to conclude a little bit, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, wow, told the BBC that Molt is presumed to have lost control of the car and driven into the pond. So again, like I said, he could potentially have been drunk. He did have several drinks that night. Or was it just a complete freak accident? We have no idea. But at that time, that residential area was a huge construction site. Barely anything was built. Erica's house wasn't built then, but the lakes had already been put in place. So apart from that, there wasn't much there. So it's so crazy to think that there was people working on that site, then people building the houses, people then moving into these houses and buying the houses, and there was a dead body literally feet away. It's so crazy, and it's also so sad. 22 years he was in there. So I am very, very, very glad that he was found and that his loved ones can hopefully get some form of closure. Imagine your loved one just vanishing like that. It's just mind-blowing. And to think, if Jerry wasn't looking at Google Maps that day or any day at that point or that specific area, he could still be in there, which is absolutely insane. So sadly, similar to the first case, we have the Davey Lee Niles case, and this one, it really breaks my heart. The other one does as well, obviously, but Davey at the time was 72 years old and he disappeared on October the 11th 2006. So this one was a little bit more recent, and this case took place in Michigan in the States, and Davey had been meeting up with a friend at a local pub or bar called Jake's Bar, and this was in Byron Township in Michigan. So there were reports that said that Davey left pretty quickly and abruptly from the bar, and he was sadly never seen again. And this is really heartbreaking, but at the time he was battling cancer, he was also struggling with depression, and he just wasn't in a good frame of mind in the slightest. But there was just no trace of him. He had a whole family, he had children, and his family did continue to search for him for many, many years. Sadly, in 2011, they did give up, which is a really sad thing to do, but yeah, there's only so much you can do in these cases. If there is literally no trace of them, what are you supposed to go off? 9, almost 10 years go by and the family finally got their answer. So we're now jumping to 2015 and it's November the 10th and a man by the name of Brian Houseman spotted something interesting while he was at work. So Brian worked in the local Cook funeral home in Byron Centre and strangely enough he was outside working at the time. He was decorating one of the trees. They're pretty big trees, but he was decorating them for Christmas when something in the Kent County pond caught his eye. He did only notice this when he got to the top of the tree because he was adding the star on. He looked down and he happened to notice something in the pond. And it's not like a little pond, it's quite a big pond. So to the naked eye, it would have been very, very hard to see unless you were in a specific position and the water was really, really settled that day and it was really, really clear. But it is actually somewhat clear on Google Maps. Also, it is another thing that you can look on Google Maps and you can see this specific thing in the water. So Brian called the police to report it and the car was pulled from the water. So whatever it was hadn't gone in there recently because there was no disturbance in the grass, there was no tyre tracks, there was nothing. But Lieutenant Ron Gates from the Kent County Sheriff's Department, I really struggle saying all these words, said, quote, "The windows were really mucky from algae and everything else. We couldn't really see inside the vehicle really well. We couldn't open the doors. So we actually broke the driver's side and the passenger side window of the vehicle," unquote. They kind of instantly knew who the car belonged to. So when Davey went missing, his car information was everywhere because it was on his missing persons flyer. But the car did also contain Davey's IDs and Davey's documentation, and sadly it did also contain the body of Davey himself. I believe they couldn't match his body straight away from dentals, so they had to rely on DNA matches, but they pretty much had no question that it was him and it was his car. So his family were instantly informed and they all gathered around the pond to sort of pay their respects and see where he's been all this time. So Scott Hathaway, who was Davey's son-in-law, said, quote, "For us today, it's a closure of a long search. Why God waited 9 years, I have no idea, but we're happy. It's good to have him home," end quote. So for these people to just vanish from the face of the earth, yet weirdly be right there where everyone has access to be able to see them, it blows my mind because it just happens to be a coincidence that someone stumbles across this one specific point on Google Maps and there is a body there. It is insane to me, but I'm so glad that both these people were found. They're both heartbreaking stories to me though. My thoughts do go out massively to the families that were involved, but like I said, I am very glad that they were found. They got the answers, they got their loved ones back to an extent. But to take away from this episode, Google Maps can solve some shit. But if you were to spend enough time on Google Maps, you would find some sketchy shit. It really wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, I do want to just quickly mention that when I was researching this, I found out that William was definitely not the only person to vanish and be found a while later in his car in some form of body of water. And I basically came across a YouTube account and a YouTube channel. It's called Adventures with Purpose, and if you get a second, please go and watch some of their videos. They are incredible. I have only watched maybe 2 videos. My mind was absolutely blown by what I saw. So they're basically a volunteer dive team, and I think originally they worked on just clearing up the waters all across America, but then they upped their game to pulling out huge bits of debris, dangerous things, like I said, just cleaning up the waters. And sadly, they do also end up finding missing people in these waters, and usually it's when they are retrieving cars from the water. So I think the first video I actually watched, they were just retrieving a car and they had no idea that there was a body inside, and I really respected them for this because they were exceedingly respectful of that situation. They didn't obviously show the body, they were covering up the crime scene to make sure no one could see, keeping the public away from that area until the police could take over. They were just very respectful, very professional. But yeah, this topic does really interest me, so I did watch a few of their other videos, and I don't want anyone to start thinking that I hate cops or police. I don't. I have the biggest respect for any form of public service person. I really do. However, in some of these situations, these guys are solving missing persons cases, finding loved ones. Unfortunately, they are usually deceased, but they are giving families answers, and some of the police work in these situations is I have no words. It makes my blood boil. A lot of them, police work is incredible and they are really respectful. They work alongside these guys, they thank them, etc. And I understand police departments have to follow certain laws, but there was one specific video where a young guy had gone missing. I think he was only 17 years old, and the mum knew he was in that lake. She knew that her car was in that lake and he was in it. Like, not knew as in, like, was involved, but you know, mother's instinct. And she begged and begged and begged the police department to search this specific lake, and the police were like, well, yeah, we know there's 6 cars in the lake, but like, they really didn't give a shit. They flat out refused to help. They flat out refused to even look for the boy for a few days. So these guys, so Adventures with a Purpose, went and decided to do the search for them, and sadly they found him. They found the car, and they found the boy in the car. His body was in the car. So obviously the police were called, police got involved, and the sheriff, oh my god, his behaviour and other police officers from that department were, disgusting behaviour. They were laughing at the scene of the crime, saying, bet he's not in there. He's probably just off somewhere with his girlfriend, still flat out refusing that he was in there. Oh, it really, really frustrates me so much. But these guys are incredible. They're giving people answers, so I just had to include that in this episode. Like, please, if you are really, really interested in this sort of topic, go and check out their channel. I will leave all their information or links or something in the description of this episode, so go and check it out. But that is it for today's episode. I'm sorry it was a short one. I've been a very busy girl, so hopefully some longer episodes will be coming in the future, but at the moment in time I am pretty busy, so I'm so sorry that this was another short episode, but I couldn't not talk about this. It is insane. It really, really is. But you'll have to let me know your thoughts on this subject. Have you come across these cases before? But thank you so much for joining me this week. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you to you guys. Please give it a massive thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below and subscribe if you are not. And if you're listening on podcast streaming services, thank you so much to you guys. Please rate, review, share, do whatever you can to help spread the word, and I will catch you next week. Bye.